This episode of The Prod is brought to you by Station Square Restaurant, Modern Methods Brewery, Brokers Realty, Salvatore's Italian Grill, Green Life Holdings, and Patty Leopardi Knapp for Judge. 3, 2. Ladies and gentlemen, listeners, lovers, and friends, welcome back to The ProdCast. I am your excited host, Jim Fogarty, coming to you up above Dave Grohl Alley in beautiful downtown Warren, Ohio. This is Season 4, and Season 4, we got a little bit of changes happening with The Prod. So I want to get them out of the way before we get to our most excellent guest of Episode 1, Season 4. The premiere episode. A little bit of changes, and here they are quickly. We're doing a little bit of video today. That may or may not be a thing. We're not 100% sure. It's kind of a test run today. I think it's going to be video, and you may see all of the show in video or maybe portions of it and have to listen to all of it on all major podcasting platforms, which you can share. So that's one change, adding a little bit of video. The other change is we are having sponsors. We're going to mention them in the beginning of each show, but we'll break in middle of the show after we're got some rhythm going and do, some commercials for sponsorship. We wanted to be able to do that so we didn't waste a lot of time doing sponsorships and taking time up in the front of the show where people want to just get to the meat and potatoes of the things. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, I'm pumped. Sitting across from me is my friend, my former mayor. I moved out of the city, although I'm still here. I guess you are still my mayor since we're still here downtown. And one of the stalwarts in Warren City politics for the last 20 years, I would say, right?
It's close.
Close enough, right? Mr. Doug Franklin, Mayor of Warren, Ohio, thank you for coming to the show, man. I'm really pumped to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Jim.
Yeah, definitely. I'm excited to have this show. We are going to do a kind of two-part Dub City. The mayor courageously and graciously has agreed, as well as his challenger in the primary, Ken McPherson, who is the councilman at large, and he's running against Doug in the spring, and they're each going to do an episode. So Doug's episode 1, obviously, and Ken will be episode 2. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. For those out there, Doug, who don't know you, let me preface it with this, and kind of as a disclaimer, too, to the listeners out there and viewers. Doug and I have worked together on several projects. The Packer Music Hall, which I was a trustee of for a dozen years, first under Michael O'Brien, reappointed under Doug's administration. I left there as the president and shifted over into the Packard Foundation, which is the nonprofit side of it, where I was the president for many years. Now Megan Reed is doing a great job as the president. And we've done projects and worked with Doug on renovating the Tea Garden in Packard Park and the elevator in Packard in Packard Music Hall, as well as working on some projects with Warren City Schools, Warren's Any Given Child. So Doug and I have a great familiarity with one another.
Yes.
And he is... I consider Doug a friend. I say this all as a disclaimer so that the viewers or listeners don't get it twisted in the sense that everyone or a lot of people know that I'm a political media consultant. Doug and I are not working together on his campaign, nor is Ken McPherson and I working together on his campaign. So I want it to be just real clear, like there's no favoritism, there's no...
Well, I'm glad you're not working on his campaign.
So let's get into it. Doug, your history of accomplishments, man. You were the president of council, you were a safety service director, and now you're the mayor. How did you get involved, and tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it's interesting, Jim, and thanks for having me again. And,
of course.
And thanks to the listeners. I always tell the truth regarding how I got into politics. There was never a burning desire to be mayor, let alone Warren's first African-American mayor. My whole motivation was just a desire and ability and a need to serve the public. So public service was always my mantra in terms of what I wanted to do. And when I was born and raised in the city of Warren, and obviously when I was a political science major at Kent State University with with an emphasis on American government. When I came home, I started working at General Motors and raised a family, got married, raised a family. Probably about 12 years into my career at General Motors, I decided to use my political degree to run for public office. And I was successful at my first run for city councilman of the Fourth Ward, which is the downtown ward which we sit in right now. And from there, I went to council at large, and then to council president, and then to director of public service and safety. And then after Michael O'Brien's departure, I ran for mayor and became successful 12 years ago. So it really was like, I always say it was as if my path was sort of divinely guided, because it was never a desire, but I just kept gaining more experience, more knowledge of how government works. Obviously, being born and raised in the community that I now serve is a big plus, because everything I do is from the heart, because I care for this community. Now my grandkids are being raised in this community. So that's pretty much the path, Jim. That's
pretty awesome. What propelled you to run that first initial time?
Actually, an opening. The council person at that time was Michael O'Brien, and he decided to run for...
Michael O'Brien, trailblazing.
Yeah. He decided to run for councilman at large. He did not ask me to run, but I saw the opening. I was already a precinct committee person at that time.
Oh, okay.
So I just took the plunge at that time. But I was blessed to have, an opportunity to, first of all, work at General Motors and raise my family and not have to worry about money or anything like that. So that was pretty secure. But it gave me an opportunity to actually use some of the skills that I developed in college and to fill that need or my desire to serve the public, and particularly the city of Warren.
Did you feel like those studies, that political science degree and the emphasis on American government, assisted you?
I think it helped me, but I always tell this story that nothing helped me more. My college degree and all of the educational training that I received at Kent State, nothing helped me more than actually working out at General Motors, because I got to interact, and we became a family. There was 14,000 employees out there at that time. Wow. So it was like a city in itself. And I got to work with, side by side, people from all different backgrounds, different types of communities. So I started to develop an understanding of the commonality of our population, regardless of race, color, creed, any of those things, religion. We all had some common needs, and I sort of built my political philosophy on that, is emphasizing that commonality and trying to meet those common needs and bringing people together. So that's sort of, I always say I cut my real political teeth out of that plant.
Well, there's one thing that you always hear when your name's brought up, and everyone always says, what a super nice guy, like a genuine, authentic guy. And certainly that's going to probably help your career more than a political science degree.
It definitely does.
Yeah.
Elections are always, people have to like you first. They have to know that you care. And that's mainly, that's I think, given to me by my parents and my upbringing. I always try to treat people nice.
Were your parents from Warren also?
They were actually from West Virginia.
Oh, okay.
My dad was a coal miner. He came here. Him and my mom came here as youngsters. I was the only one. I was the youngest of my siblings, but I was born. I was the only of my siblings born in the city of Warren. The rest were born in West Virginia. So
oh, wow!
I always have that one up on them.
You still have family there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
What part? Where?
Right in the center, Charleston.
Oh, cool.
Right in the capital.
Very historical place.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you go back there?
Probably every year.
Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
Super fun.
Yeah, it is. Beautiful part of our country.
Not as beautiful as Warren, Ohio, though.
No, nothing's as beautiful as our city.
I mean, I always say this when I open the show. Beautiful downtown Warren, Ohio. And certainly we've gone through tough times with plant closures and employment. There's all kind of challenges, as has the country. But in the last 10 years, we've been here at this studio for the last 15. Of course, my creative partner, Matt Smith, had a studio down the street a little bit further. on West Market. But so really we've been down here, say 20 plus years, right? I've been doing this, almost 25 years.
Okay.
And the progress that's been made in the last 10, really in the last 5 to 7 has been staggering. How has that bolstered or boosted your morale as a mayor? Because you grew up here and you saw it transition from, like you said, 14,000 people at GM and people out at Delphi and over here at Republic and over at Copperwater. I mean, this was a thriving, bustling community. Economic downturn with some of these plant closures, and now we're kind of seeing this renaissance that is so inspiring. I'm inspired to even be a small portion of it. And so, what's that like for you to witness it and have kind of fostered that along in your 12 years?
Thank you for that, Jim. Because it's, I always tell anyone who asks, it speaks. Not only, I like to take credit for these things, obviously, but I think the credit goes to the resilience of our community. I've always believed in our ability to bounce back, our ability to take a punch and get back up, dust ourselves off, and get back in the ring. That's the spirit of being a Warrenite, being in Trimble County, being in the Mahoning Valley. It's in our DNA. So I didn't expect anything less. When we lost all of those jobs at GM, that was personal to me. I was out of the plant, but I knew a lot of those families who had to move away. I knew the hole that created in our economy. But seeing those families leave and seeing that devastation, it was personal. But once again, now here we are. We see over a $2 billion investment with Ultium Sales and Foxconn and some of the supply chain companies that are now setting up, and it's causing we bounce back. We did what we always do. So I really just believe in the resilience of this community, the people in this community, and it just makes it that much more of a double pleasure for me to serve as mayor.
I'm glad you brought those. Those are major employers, and they're the major employers of we'd consider like the new economy, right? We were a manufacturing base before, but now we're kind of getting into tech and this idea of Voltage Valley, and right down the road, Rick Stockberger with Bright, and now all these places that have built up or popped up around recently. Tony Van Kirk's downtown 124.
Yes.
The downstairs, the underground, at new ownership, right down Weston, Maine, Noodle Fun, Nova. We just keep going, right? I mean, you just keep talking about these places. So now we have, and not to mention the residentials, right? Yes. How do we, as a city, or I guess what is your, what's a priority to continue to create an environment so that those folks who are moving in or those jobs that will be available want to come and reside in Warren other than other communities?
I'm glad you asked that question. I'm working with, obviously, one of my opponents, Dennis Blank, and we're working with the Fund for What We created. Me and my former mayoral opponent created a...
Yeah, can let me just jump in on this real quick if I can, because this is kind of a I guess a funny or whatever.
It is.
Okay. So Doug and I worked together for a long time on a bunch of city projects. Me as a volunteer in a nonprofit capacity and as a business owner, and Doug obviously is a civil servant and elected official. And so then a guy moves back to town. This guy Dennis Blank, and he hires me to run his campaign against Doug.
Yeah.
Now, in all fairness to myself, okay, I called Doug and I told Dennis I was going to do this. Hey man, Doug and Doug had made other arrangements, or I don't remember the exact situation, but anyways, we run a pretty, I think contentious is probably too strong of a word, but a very competitive.
It's a great campaign.
Campaign, and here these guys and Dennis was very critical of some of the things that Doug was doing and different things, and then fast forward. Doug wins re-election handily, and about a year or so later, these two guys get together. See, this is what I think. This is where I say, like, I have a lot of that gave me so much more respect for both of you. Yeah. But that gave me so much more respect because you took it, I would take it personally. Yeah. You took it personally. I would take it personally too. Like, you're coming back. You've been away. Dennis lived in New York City for a long time, was a marketing director of Fortune Magazine and a bunch of other jobs.
Great resume.
Great resume. You're coming back to my town and you're going to tell us what to do. And, so that's how I would react. I'm sure that's how there was some feelings like that.
There was.
But the courage and the mutual respect and the mutual goals that you both had to make Warren better at whatever cost. Like, we both share the same passions. Let's get together and be allies. I just thought, and I still think, with you guys working on the fund for Warren's Future with Anthony Pavlis and with Sam Cavelli and other players involved, like, I just think, man, that doesn't happen. You don't usually hear that a lot of times. That's what politics should do.
That's what it should do.
Yeah.
And I'm so proud of it. And I credit myself and I credit Dennis. And it speaks to, I don't mind having an opponent who really cares about the city, because I've seen them come and go. And I've seen them, some after they lose, you never hear from them again. Dennis was not that. He stayed involved. He stayed engaged in the public discourse. So we got together by happenstance and just had an idea. Let's create a public-private partnership. It's funny that you mention it, because I remember when we went into AVI headquarters and Cavelli Center, the Cavelli headquarters. I remember one of the family members for the Piablas family said when they saw us two walk in together, because it was probably a couple of months after it wasn't long after the election.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And they thought they were going to have to call the police. So, and that's a true story. I'm not going to tell the daughter's name of the Piablases, but yeah, I think it had a lot of shock value.
Yeah.
And then when we laid out our commitment and we told them what we would like to create, Sam Cavelli and Anthony Piablas separately were all in because of that. And believe me, I'm the only Democrat, so I was able to work across party lines. Dennis ran as an independent, but we were, obviously these are two of the most successful businessmen in the valley, basically, when you look at what they've been able to do with their family businesses. They're they're on the national map in terms of successful businesses. So what we did was we got them all together and we just started to sit down and plan. We invited the business community to a couple of fundraisers. We were able to create some seed money for economic development. And that gets back to, I know we went away from it, but that gets back to what we're trying to do. We're actually working on a large transformational project that's not too far from here. I can't say where, but everybody thinks they know where it is. And a developer he heard the story, he heard the pitch. Several developers had an opportunity. Well, one has really grasped to that situation. And he said it was because of the leadership politically and of our business community that made him say, yes, this is a great place to invest. So back to your original question, we're working on, and this is just recently, a Foxconn Day in the city of Warren. So that's what we're doing to welcome these new businesses, these new investors into our community, and to lay out the red carpet for them and to give them their own special day. There's a lot of people from other countries, from different cultures, from different sections of our country who are located now in Lordstown, Ohio. So we wanted to do our part. To welcome them to our community and show them it's a great place to live, a great place to invest, and they very graciously has accepted that invitation. So, and we're doing a lot of other things, but that was the answer to your question that came out of the Fund for Warren's Future. One of the successes that we think there's many lined up, but that was one of the things that I'm most proud of with that private-public partnership.
Lenten time or anytime, Station Square Seafood is delivered daily and always prepared fresh every time. And now to go with your salmon, swordfish, or any favorite dish, Station Square's small batch signature seasonings: lemon pepper, Cajun, or charcoal steak rub. An attorney our community has trusted for 3 decades, Patty Knepp. experienced in both criminal and civil law, and the only candidate appointed to serve as acting judge. Paid for by the committee to elect Patty Leopardi for judge. Yeah, it's very rare that you see that happen in a community with two, kind of initially adversarial figures, coming together for the common good. And I can't give you enough kudos to you and of course to Dennis. And I talk to Dennis a lot, and he's as excited. I love hearing it from you, to see both your guys' passion and enthusiasm for the possibilities and the potential. And I'm aware of some of those investors, and certainly won't say any names, but some really cool stuff. And I want to just kind of dovetail back a little bit, just to throw a shout out to Anthony Peavolis and to Sam Cavelli. And both of those guys, as Doug has mentioned, both of those guys are major investors, major employers in our community. They have Anthony's is a worldwide company. And Sam's obviously nationwide. They're great stakeholders in the city. They're also great individuals. I've had the pleasure of working for both of them as clients, both for O'Charlie's and Panera's with Sam, and recently with Anthony on a project for AVI and the St. Demetrius Church, which is over 100 years old.
Great celebration.
Yeah. You went to that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
I got christened I'm now Mayor Frankopoulos.
That's good stuff.
Yeah. Great celebration. You did a fantastic job.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. It was a lot of fun work to work with him, and to see his, I knew him from afar. Hey, how's it going? That kind of stuff. And of course, the show we did last season with, I forget what the title of the show was, The New Warren, Ohio, with some of those young entrepreneurs like Rick and Adam from Modern Methods and those folks. But to work with him close up and to see his passion and his work ethic, we were here, myself and two of his staff, two of his team, several nights, because we was a little bit of a deadline and it was kind of a crunch job, and we were here. And it was like 1 o'clock in the morning, and we finished up, and we had been working. It was like a 12-hour day, and the one of the girls that was there, goes, well, we're going to call Anthony up. And I go, you're going to call Anthony? It's 1 o'clock in the morning. She goes, he's up. He came here at 1:30 in the morning, and we watched the preview to make edits, and the show ran like the day after or whatever. It was just a guy that has that type of commitment at the position he is. When you're me and you're kind of a small operator, you got a few teammates. This guy's running, he's got probably thousands of employees, definitely hundreds, probably thousands. And he's up at 1 in the morning and he's working. I'm going like...
And that's why, and me and Dennis always laughs about this, because Dennis is actually the Fund for Warren's Future, and I know it's one of your later questions, but I'll go into it now.
Sure, yeah.
We have 3 voting members. That's myself representing government, local government, and Sam and Anthony representing the business community on all our decisions. Dennis has the unenviable job of being the administrator and the secretary. So imagine my schedule's pretty, because I'm going to be very available when it's time to sit down and talk about business and economic development. But getting those 2 giants in the corporate world, getting those schedules to meet. And we meet monthly. People don't see the amount of time that we put in behind the scenes every single month, probably for the past 5 years, working on these things. And they're spirited meetings, but Dennis has to, it's like herding cats. I don't know how he does it, but he does a great job with it.
Well, I can attest to exactly what you say, because like I say, Dennis and I talk pretty frequently, and he's often talking about Funds for Warren's Future, and I met with Doug and Anthony and that same kind of thing, the herding cats, kind of deal.
Yeah, so. I won't tell how many times I have to talk him off the ledge so that he stays engaged, because we need him. He's like the glue that holds all of us together, and I appreciate his commitment.
Tell me, let's get into the little bit nitty gritty. We're not going to serve you all softball here, Doug.
All right.
Okay.
Fine.
But with Warren being such a small city and where so many people know each other, voters often pick their candidates by if they like them, like what we already talked about. Today, we're going to focus on goals and policies, right? So one of the things I want to ask, and a lot of these questions came from Warren voters or Warren stakeholders, and for this upcoming election and this upcoming if you should be granted another term, what's the single most important policy that you'll pursue, and what will be the goal of that policy, and how will you know if it's successful, and when will it be successful?
Well, and it's a great question, and I'll go back to a policy I established for my administration, because I can set administrative policy, and it sounds general, but it's very important to how my administration is expected to operate every single year, and it's simple. Last year's excellence is this year's mediocrity. So we always have to set a new bar every single year on our expectations and what we expect as outcomes. So, and that will continue to be the number one driving policy for all of our department heads and our workers in the city of Warren. Because we're not a big city, we don't have a lot of staff. So we always have to challenge ourselves and find new ways to solve old problems.
How do you get those people? Because I know what it's like to have to wear multiple hats,
yes.
Right? We're a functional production studio and advertising, media agency. At our biggest, there were 6 of us. Mm-hmm. At our smallest, there was 1 of us, mm-hmm. and now it's me and a few creative partners from that are mostly off-site as we're trying to rebuild back. Surviving through COVID and trying to rebuild back. But Warren's in a very similar situation, right? The population has decreased, mm-hmm. so the tax base has decreased, so there's less funds, but there's more expense, and there's less workers, but less. The job is still this. The city didn't get smaller. Yeah. The city stayed the same size. How do you incentivize these workers to, especially? Listen, if you've been in a job for a long time, it's very easy to get complacent. I'm not pointing fingers or casting shade on anybody, but if you're not challenging yourself every day, or if leadership isn't challenging you every day, then sometimes you get complacent. How do you keep the fire in everybody? Because I'm sure, I don't know this, but I'm sure with everybody kind of having to do more, wearing multiple hats, you'll hear guys sometimes go, when I worked over at CSC, I got scolded one time. Me and another guy, they sent us into these soaking pits to shovel out all this brick, and it was supposed to take...
I think I did that job as a summer job.
The worst,
That's
man.
terrible.
Oh, it was hot.
It made me a better college student.
It made me want to finish college.
Yes.
It was like about 115 degrees.
Yes, I did have that job.
But they didn't tell us the job was supposed to take a week. We did it in a night.
Yeah, that's terrible.
And they go like, what are you doing? Yeah. And I go, well, what are you talking about? But my understanding of work was like, get it done, move on to the next project. You've not only helped yourself by giving yourself some esteem for finishing something, but also you help the company because now you're moving to the next thing. How do you keep these people motivated?
There are several things. And I'd just like to put some of this in context, Jim. When I first took over as mayor, we weren't in the best financial situation. And it's not like our public employees are at the high end of the wage scale for public employees as compared to other cities. So imagine this. First and foremost, I was faced immediately with contract negotiations. Now, my experience as safety service director helped because I established a rapport of respect for what they do and good faith bargaining. So we were able to, 5 contracts, that's almost 3-year contracts basically, or 5. We did it 5 times where we were able to administer pay freezes throughout our workforce. That's tough to do when they're, like you said, they're asked to do more and not expect any increase in pay. So that's one of the, and I didn't even think of that even after seeing some of the questions. I didn't even think of that until you asked the question. That was a monumentous task to keep, not only to keep people excited, productive, enthused, and keeping morale at a certain level, but not asking them to, at the same time, asking them to agree to a pay freeze. That was pretty monumental. But what I try to do as mayor is always, and as safety director as well before becoming mayor, was always reach out to those employees and those department heads and express my appreciation and how I value their work ethic, and to at least thank them personally for a job well done. That's all I could really pretty much offer. And they take a lot of heat sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes deserve it, but a lot of times unnecessarily. But it's an ongoing task, and that's why we establish that policy of what we did last year. I don't care how good it was; it's not good enough. We have to raise the bar every single year. So we keep moving our standards up, and they understand that, and I think they're responding to it. You're absolutely right. The population and the tax base has declined, but not the amount of roads that needs to be plowed, not the amount of garbage households that have garbage accounts with the city, 22,000 to be exact.
Yeah, you guys come into Howland and pick garbage up too.
Yes, we have out, because they do such a great job with a minimum staff, and now we're getting outside customers. And we're able to do that because they have in their mindset a set of values and of performance that's expected. We want to provide high quality services at an affordable rate, and that's the mantra every single year.
You brought up something. I wrote it down because I wanted to. It's funny because those outside services you contract, like, that makes the city money, right? It goes back into the general fund.
Well, not in our enterprise accounts, which is sewer, water, sanitation, stormwater. They don't go in. They go into an enterprise fund. The law won't allow you to use enterprise fund revenues for general fund purposes. So with those expanded accounts, and we do well in our enterprise funds, but I can't hire policemen with them.
Gotcha.
I have to use income tax revenue only, and that was another thing we had to we had to establish and ask voters for an income tax increase for our safety services and our roads projects. We were fortunate because we think we're doing a good job, and it was granted on the first try and renewed twice since.
So recently, Warren has an impound lot or an expanded impound lot.
Yes.
And the numbers just came out, and I think it was like a $600,000. My numbers, I didn't write it down, unfortunately. I should have prepared better for this question.
It's okay.
But it kind of came off top.
I think I got the number.
Yeah. That seems to be going well.
Yeah. It was predicted, and I'm not going to say who, but it was predicted that would cost us over $300,000. It cost us $56,000 to build that impound lot. The first year of collections, we've already made $256,000.
$256,000.
So
it's incredible.
That's a pretty good business proposition.
Yeah.
And what we're doing with that, because our expenses in our police department, particularly, and this came up, we needed to get on a comprehensive vehicle replacement plan, because our cruisers are 24/7. They're always moving. So we needed to do that instead of just scrambling at the end of a year and trying to figure out how we're going to price these high mileage police cruisers. So that's why that impound lot, that's a dedicated funding source that we can use and tap into to actually have a real, not just an on paper, but a real funding source for a vehicle replacement plan for our police department. So it was a great investment.
Yeah.
And that's just the first year. So we expect that to grow. So it's exceeding our expectations.
That's fantastic, because those police cruisers are expensive.
Correct. Yes.
Then you look at the fire department and you're like,
same thing. Yeah.
Holy smoke.
Yeah.
Those fire trucks, I never realized this. They're custom built.
Custom built. Approximately $700,000 fully equipped.
And we're getting a couple new fire trucks?
A couple new fire trucks.
That'll be great. I'm sure those guys will be thrilled about it, because they work hard.
And they're replacing some old equipment. We have an obligation as a city administration and our citizenry to make sure that our safety sources are the best equipped, best trained, because we don't have a lot of manpower. So we have to make sure that they have the best tools at their disposal so that they can do the job for us.
Mentored by her father, attorney John Leopardi, and through a career of service to her community, Patty Knapp's dedication, integrity, and judicial temperament will serve us well as our next judge. Paid for by the committee to elect Patty Leopardi for judge.
Need great food fast? Visit mysalvatores.com and order anything on our menu for quick pickup. All of your favorites ready when you are. Specials available on mysalvatores.com.
Award-winning beer with live weekly entertainment.
Without doing wrong. Without doing wrong.
Modern Methods Brewery, downtown Warren, Ave Grohl Alley. Check taproom hours at modernmethodsbrew.com and come thirsty. Want to be debt-free faster, save money in taxes and insurance, and retire with more wealth? Call Zach Byler at Green Life Holdings today for full-service financial advisory. 330-219-5225.
Running a city ain't easy.
No.
A city of Warren with challenges. We'll get to that in a little bit.
Okay.
What's one accomplishment in your political career that you would point to as evidence that you deserve re-election to the city? It's a tough one.
No, it's not tough, but to single it down to one is tough, and that's almost impossible. But we've had a lot of accomplishments that I'm proud of. But I.
Well, tell us about a few.
I will tell you about it.
Just one.
Obviously, the number one goal of my previous two terms was to remove that $256,000 eyesore on the northwest side of town called Old St. Joseph Hospital. Well, if you go by there today, there's just a slither of a building left. So we've been able to do that, and that's huge. But I also, just 2 days ago, we announced a $10 million by an investment group, a venture group, on the city's southwest side, which hasn't seen an investment of this magnitude probably since Warren Western Reserve High School was built nearly 50 years ago. So those are two major things that I'm proud of. But I can't just stop there because we are now in the midst of the largest road resurfacing program that's ever taken place in the city of Warren's history. So we've been able to accomplish a lot with all the challenges that we face. And there's a lot more, but those three things kind of stand out. I got to mention changing the management structure at Packard Music Hall, going from 2 employees trying to run that music hall. And it's no fault of their own, but they couldn't book shows. They couldn't utilize that building to its full extent. With the restrictions of government. So we worked with the unions and we were able to bring in JAC Entertainment. There was some growing pains with that transition, but now it's starting to work. Just a couple of years ago, they had their largest show inventory throughout the history of the hall, and that goes back to the Kinley Players. They had more shows there than that's ever been presented there in a calendar year. So we're proud of that. The golf course, which is a political football and a debacle for years. We've changed the management there as well. Very proud of that. Scott Carahan is doing a great job bringing that golf course back to life. So those are a few of the things that I'm proud of.
I forgot some of these things.
Yeah, well, you know what? I thought because in my job, you don't dwell on your successes and rest on your laurels. There's always something else to do. So I had to really think about what do I look back on. But those things, and I could name more. But the future is bright. If you're talking about why it should be, we've also laid out a master plan, a master improvement plan for all of our city parks. Nearly $6 million, upgrades to the amphitheater, all of these things, and they're funded. We have the funds to take them, so we're not going to be asking taxpayers to pay for these things. So those are a few of the highlights, Jim, that I'm proud of.
Makes me excited.
And I need to complete those things.
That's Doug's plug for vote. Please vote for me because I still got a job to do.
Yes.
I like that.
Yes,
I like
you.
that. Those a couple of those things you mentioned are obviously near and dear to my heart. Anything that's entertainment wise or art wise, I gravitate towards. I haven't served, on the board at Packard for a long time,
and I appreciate that. Thank you for your service.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure, and I set some goals out when this is how naive I was when, Michael O'Brien appointed me. I was only 27 years old. I was full of piss and vinegar and thought, I'm going to get in here and we're going to knock, and then you start learning about it and you're like, you can't use public money for private, to risk. Can't use taxpayer dollars to risk, and that was the only way it was set up, which is one of the reasons the foundation was set up.
Yes, thank God.
But that was a you set a plan, and I remember sitting there with the board members at the time and saying, here's a couple things I want to do, I want to accomplish, and then when I'm done with these things, I'll be done. Mm-hmm. And I only plan on serving one term. And, I had a list of like 7 or 8 things. Yeah. I didn't get to those 7 or 8 things actually until I was off the board with part of the elevator project and some other stuff. But it was like, man, dude, this is like, it's difficult. When you have to work within these structures and guidelines, it's not like when you run a business and you're kind of a sole operator, like you're the boss. Yeah. You can just decide what you want to do. You don't have to go to, this committee or that committee or kind of the not the bureaucratic tape, but the red tape that you have to go through. And these procedures are all put in place to protect the taxpayers, and so that there's oversight and whatnot. But
well, that's one of the things we always in our meetings with Sam and Anthony. I always have to let them know. All that's great. You guys you can make these decisions unilaterally and with clear authority, and it's done. Well, government just doesn't operate that. And you're right. It's because it's not my money. It's the public's money. So we have all kind of guidelines and guardrails and safeguards to make sure that we have procedures and processes that protects the public's money and protects, obviously, decision makers from making bad decisions.
Yeah. Well, certainly that sometimes the public doesn't think of that. They think of, well, the mayor can't just do this, or even like the president. Why doesn't he just do? Yeah. Like, it doesn't work that way. It's not a business. I know sometimes we think about that in the conversation, and I think, not to knock Donald Trump, okay, but I think that idea, that manifest of that type of personality trait,
yes,
it's nice because it shows strength. People like strong people. But it doesn't work that way. There's checks and balances in our national government and checks and balances in our local government, like city council.
Correct.
The mayor just doesn't make.
Government just doesn't move at the speed of business.
Right. And it's not meant to.
It's not meant to.
People go, reason. I want a guy in there that knows how to run a business.
Yeah.
Running a government and running a business are two totally different things.
Absolutely.
Speaking about you as counsel and being involved, what's the one skill that you think you bring the past 12 years as mayor that that's made you successful in the goals that you have? And how did you develop those skills that you have that you've employed in these public-private partnerships like the Fund for Warren's Future? I know we kind of talked about it, but like, if you were going to tell someone who was a high school kid or college kid or someone that might be interested in getting involved in public service or running for public office, what are some of the skills that you feel like you've developed in those 12 years that have served you to have these successes?
Yes. Jim, I think first and foremost, it's government and politics is a people business. So I think what I bring to the table, and I think one of my strengths is bringing people together. And I think that was honed at General Motors, obviously working with 10 members of council as 1/10 of a voting structure. Being president of council, I had to preside over meetings and run meetings and appoint committees. And as safety service director, I had to manage almost 15 departments, 450 employees. So I've always had to work with people. But as mayor, I think my strongest strength and what I'm most proud of is my ability to reach out regionally and nationally to build coalitions and collaborations for the benefit of our citizens. And that's one of the things I can go through a lot of examples of things that wouldn't be happening if it were not for collaborations. St. Joseph, if I didn't have a relationship with Governor DeWine, the citizens of Warren would be footing half of that bill to get that hospital torn down. But because I reached out to Governor DeWine before he became governor, when he was Attorney General. And we forged a relationship that had him file a joint lawsuit on behalf of the Attorney General's office for the state of Ohio against the owner. Now, it obviously, time changed. Fast forward, he becomes governor, but we still had our relationship intact. So we were able to get a brownfield remediation grant. I'm proud of the fact that Lieutenant Governor Husted said that when I was in Columbus, and I thanked him for giving us the money. He said, "No, I want to thank you because you guys kept telling us your story. You kept telling us about this, which isn't a traditional brownfield site. It's an old hospital. But we kept telling our story and the public health risks that existed on the northwest side of Warren, put a neighborhood in jeopardy, and thank God no one was ever hurt in that big vacant structure. It was an extreme public health risk. But he said it was our narrative that made the state change their policy. And that was the first brownfield site, old hospital that was treated as a brownfield site. But the point is, it's the collaboration. We have a plan, and it's funded, to remove the Summit Street Dam, one of the largest dams along the the Mahoning River corridor. That's all funded because of a coalition between 7 mayors who have dams, and their cities border the Mahoning River. We're taking all of those dams out, all funded by the EPA. A lawsuit that was filed against the steel mill which abandoned the steel mill. So there's a fund that was created for restoration of communities along the river. We've tapped that, and we've worked with our partners at Eastgate Council of Governments. Thank God for Jim Kinnick's leadership. And we've been able to get most of those dams funded. The city of Warren's funded. It's scheduled to come out next year. That's going to help with economic development because we expect to see, obviously, it's going to help some of our developments along the river. You'll see more recreation along the river, more canoeing,
Definitely.
kayaking, some more trail development. And it will create a large corridor where people can, canoe and kayak throughout the river through several communities, almost like our Lakes to River bike trail.
Yeah.
So we're doing that along our waterways. People don't know what an albatross and what, when the steel mills were running, that lake used to have an average temperature of 102 degrees at times. So there was no wildlife. There's no fishing. Nothing could happen in there. Well, now the river's cleaning itself up. When those dams come out, that process is going to accelerate probably twofold. So we'll see even more. People are fishing in there now, and some of the reports are the fish in the Mahoning River are just as healthy or more healthy than some you see at Mosquito and Lake Erie.
That's awesome.
So all of that due to partnerships. There's approximately 12,000 jobs out at 12 companies, about 3,500 jobs out of the Golden Triangle. But through a partnership with Trimble County, the City of Warren, Trimble County Engineer's Office, and Howland Township, we're working on a development plan. And we've already spent probably about $7 million there to protect and preserve those jobs. People often think of economic development as just job creation. Well, the biggest part of economic development is job retention. If you don't keep what you have, it doesn't matter what you attract because you're not keeping what you have. So all of us have formed this collaborative through cooperative agreements. And we've put our monies together, our resources together. That's why we've been able to be successful in attracting these grants, because federal government, state government loves to see collaboration. They'd rather see or fund or award these grants to communities that come together than these one-off grants. So we've mastered that. And I think you'll see in a few weeks probably some announcements because of these collaborations from the Appalachia grants that's getting ready to be announced by the state.
Man, that's awesome.
It's exciting.
A lot of people, it's funny because they'll again, I don't want to cast shade or cast a particular light on the public, but I think sometimes, and it's not their fault. We're always so busy.
Yes.
You're running your kids here. You got your job. You're just. Sometimes we're just in survival mode.
Correct.
So there's a lot of times that things you get passed over, and we're given information from outside things, national news or whatever, and some of these things are hot button, and when we focus on that and we miss things like the Golden Triangle. I didn't even really know what that was.
Yes.
People were using this term for probably a decade.
Yeah.
And only because of some work that I had done with Kim Mascarella and with Darlene St. George over at Howland Township, you mentioned.
Two of my great partners.
Well, and they sing your praises too.
Two of my great partners.
I had a real good meeting last year. Probably need to circle back with Darlene about that. But, and she kind of was talking about how much this, I think it's 4 square miles,
yes.
or right, and it's an economic driver. And not only that, people go like, okay, well, cool. Well, what does that do besides bring in tax dollars? Well, it brings in tax dollars, but it also, like you had mentioned, the bike trail and some of these
yes.
recreational water sport things, like, those people have to eat
yes.
when they're traveling and they're doing different stuff. So now all of a sudden, you're looking at your commercial property value goes up. I'm preaching the choir here, but I'm kind of
keep going.
Right, you're making your job easier here today.
Good. You're doing a great job.
You're making your commercial property value go up, and your residential go up because people want to live in places that have, great, great places to go. What do they call that? A great. The word's escaping me.
Great places to live, work, and play.
Amenities.
Amenities.
They have great amenities.
Yeah, it often gets overlooked. The Golden Triangle is the second largest manufacturing hub in the Mahoning Valley, second only to Lordstown.
Oh, wow.
So that speaks to its importance, and that speaks to why we're investing so much time and energy and collaborative effort to make sure that we not only retain those jobs, but allow those jobs to flourish and create more jobs.
And just for people who don't know, because I didn't do a good enough job of explaining it, like where it's at, the Triangle is on property that's partly Warren, partly Howland, and partly Warren Township.
Correct. They
kind of meet there, and it's
a triangle.
Yeah, it's out past. If you drove out from Warren out Largemont, past Rick Rolfe's University.
Correct.
Throwing a shout out to my boy Rick.
Just had lunch there today.
They make the greatest. I know this is so weird, but they make the greatest grilled cheese sandwiches.
Yeah.
I love their grilled cheese sandwiches.
But they're going to love you for this plug.
Well, man, Rick's my guy. Rick and Tracy are great.
Great.
It's off there to the left side, right when you pass Rick's, like where old Brainerd Strapping was in that area.
Yes.
Speaking of Brainerd Strapping, is there any
American Welding? There's a lot of things out. There was a lot out there, but there's new things out there now.
Yeah.
What's
going to happen with that Brainerd building? Anything?
Well, we're working on it, and that'll get to some of the things we'll talk about with the Dana Street property. Everybody focuses on Chris Allen's.
Let's get this is the good, the bad, and the ugly.
I'm going to open it up.
I love it
because people ask, well, why is that still closed? Here, let me give you some facts.
Let me just real quick though, so for listeners who aren't familiar with it, Dana Street is a street that runs through the city, several city blocks from Atlantic Street, from Elm to North Park.
Yes, that's a good.
It's where GE was and a bunch of other places. One of the greatest places to eat in Warren, shout out to my boy Nicky Franco's, the Buena Vista Cafe, is on Dana Street. And, Nicky's a good friend of mine, and he's a client.
Well.
And we'd have conversations about this, and he's like, I'd be like, how you doing, man? Especially during COVID when everyone was struggling. And he's like, it's okay. We're making it. Nicky's one of those guys, like, come hell or high water, he's going to grind. He's going to be okay. But that Dana Street, closure, what happened was an outside investor, a guy, I think originally from Warren, a fellow named Chris Allen, started a company called Auto Park It. And you went out there and saw how it worked and said how cool it was. Yeah. A lot of people had told me about it. I did not see it. But anyways, he bought the old GE property.
The old Delphi property.
I'm sorry.
And
you tell it better than me. Probably,
he bought the old Delphi property, and I think it's Plant 8, a couple of plants adjacent to the administration building. Not only, but he had to fight in court to get this.
Oh, that's right.
From people, let's not leave Sergio DiPaolo out of this discussion, because that often gets lost in what a mess it was after Sergio left that site. I mean, it was first of all, it was 3 times larger than the old St. Joseph's property. So, say what you will about Chris Allen, when it looks better than it did when Sergio left it. Number one, he's probably put $3 to $4 million. My figures tell me into the site. He has 30 employees out there right now, payroll of somewhere close to $1 million. He's paid all of the back taxes. And all he's asked from the city is that we close the street to secure the property while he's making the improvements. It's not my job, but city council has to, every 90 days, review that application, and they see what I see. That investment out there, it's not what we want it to be with the actual auto parket manufacturing site that Chris has described and planned and hopes to bring, but it's an improvement from what it was. We didn't have a lot of investors lining up to get that site.
Sure.
It was offered to the city of Warren when Delphi left. And they were going to give it to us, but we were going to have to clean it up. So it's kind of working out, and it's some inconvenience involved there. But I want to mention, he has a payroll down there. There's people working out there. He did purchase the GE site after GE leveled the building. Go down North Park and look to your right, and it looks a lot better than when we had a vacant building there.
Definitely.
So it's not perfect, but we don't get involved in these transactions when a developer wants to buy a site. There's nothing in the law that prevents the city from stopping that sale or transaction.
Sure.
Property values and property transactions are highly protected by the Constitution of the United States. What we have is an enforcement arm to make sure that he keeps everything up to code, and that's what we try to do with Chris. But yeah, so he's actually done what we've asked him to do. But when we talk about the Golden Triangle, that site sits in the Golden Triangle.
Yeah.
So opening that Dana Street up, there's more involved to it than just Chris Allen. We're talking about a $1 million grant we have pending to do some major improvements on the whole Golden Triangle, and that's a key piece of that property. So if we opened it up, temporarily, we probably have to close it again anyway to administer that grant and do those other improvements out there. So there's a lot of moving parts to the conversation, Jim.
Well, how do you when someone asks you or asks council members, because again, it's not, so the viewers and listeners know the mayor's not a dictator. He can't just say do X, Y, Z. And I don't want you to speak for Chris Allen, because I would never ask anybody to speak for anybody. Do you know if he has a plan to how long this road needs closed? Because, in the paper and some of the residents in that area, and aside from Nikki, who's, been there forever, he's a stalwart in the city, there's safety concerns about reaching, fire vehicles reaching those areas. How do you address that? How does city council address that?
First and foremost, before that road was closed, we went to all of our safety forces and had them sign off on it. Is this going to hamper you in any way? And both were agreeable, not without twisting. We needed an honest answer. If this is going to impede public safety services, then let us know. They all signed off. We went to even a lot of the business owners around there, including Nick. And for the greater good, probably all except maybe one signed off. Now, we have to keep reviewing that every 90 days. That's why we have that process in place. So obviously the meter's running on Chris. We expect to see more development. But right now, like I said, he has created jobs there. He has cleaned up the site to some extent. The road closure creates some inconvenience. But we have to be always mindful of the wishes of that neighborhood that's right there as well. And those are our constituents. So we'll keep pressing Chris to be forthcoming, and he's been very responsive. When city council, who has to make the decision on open or closure, to give a presentation. And I don't get a vote on that. Council has sole discretion on that. So we've been going through that process. But we have to be mindful of that. We've already invested over $4 million over $7 million, in the Golden Triangle. On some of those grants, but we have another grant that we're getting ready to implement and administer, so that we can make continual improvements with widening roads and radiuses, wayfinding, because it's kind of dark out there.
Yeah.
And this is what the business community out there are asking us to do. What do you need? And this is what they're telling us. Well, we have the wherewithal, but some of that's might even cause some more road closures. But it's the inconvenience of progress sometimes.
Not to pick on Chris Allen.
Okay.
Because he's not here to defend himself. But he owns a couple other properties, which kind of gets into, and it's not just him. There's many, many, many of these properties. St. Joe's was obviously one of them. That was the biggest hurdle to tackle. But in residential areas, where you're, if there's a TNP and those guys have done a great job, destroying some of these houses, providing, opening up areas in neighborhoods where new development, new buildings can go, new residential buildings can go. But there's a lot of older buildings that are still either dilapidated, their windows broken out, they're abandoned. Chris Allen's being one of them. He bought the old Bailey furniture, which was the I forget the family that lived there.
I'm going to call it the Hughes Mansion.
The Hughes Mansion.
That's what I call it.
Has an elevator in the building.
Yes.
And that thing's like being held up by like stilts. It looks a massive
eyesore. It looks
eyesore.
terrible, and I agree. And I've had a conversation with. He has to move quickly on that. That's just unacceptable, because we've made a concerted effort to do demolitions, and if anyone's paying attention, we've done, I think, a yeoman's job of taking down huge commercial eyesores. Obviously, everybody thinks about St. Joseph, but the hotel on Mahoning Avenue. We've just signed a contract for the Imperial Nursing Home on Todd Avenue. These commercial structures, we've done over 25 commercial structures, and probably in the last 5 years, taking them down, particularly if they're on major gateways or corridors in and out of our city, so people don't get a bad impression when they come to visit us. That has to be addressed, and we have our building official all over that. There's one down here on Pine Street. I know you're going to get to it. But
Lou's Place. It used to be called Lou's Place.
I'm glad you remembered the name. But it's an eyesore. It's one of Allen's properties, and it's being addressed. In fact, I wrote before I came to this interview. I made sure that what I was going to say is be factual. They did remove the staircase in the back so that vagrants can't get in that building, and it's secured again. But there has to be movement, or an order demolition will be placed on it. The McCready's property, which people don't realize, and that was a big center of controversy when those bricks fell off of the side of that building. I think that happened on a Saturday. By Monday morning, the earliest hour of the next business day that we could file charges, the city filed charges. The McCready's family filed an injunction, and the state granted that. The courts granted that injunction, so we're now in court with them.
People that don't know, the bricks literally fell off the building, and they're still sitting in the parking lot.
Sitting in the parking lot,
and there's beams exposed.
Yes. So the courts only required that she secured it with fencing, which she did. But we're fighting in court every single day. We did everything we could as it relates to the law. Like I said, we filed immediately. Probably before the last brick fell, charges were filed. But when she filed the injunction, everything stopped in the courts. So we're still pressing on. We have the prosecutor's office. We have an all-hands-on-deck approach to making sure that she addresses that eyesore. I'd like to see the building come down. I think she submitted plans, and I don't know if it's a legal smoke screen to do some repairs on the building. But we need it fixed, and we need it fixed now. Yeah,
I had heard that there's an insurance. They're haggling with the insurance company. I don't know this is a rumor, but
there's a lot of.
That's the old Park Place.
The old Park Place used to be a beautiful building.
It was a great building.
Great building.
Actually, a friend of mine had a title agency there.
Yeah, we were looking at it when we were moving out of 418 Main, which is another old city-owned building that's scheduled to come down.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, because we can't ask people to take care of their properties if we aren't taking ours. Thank God that we moved all of our departments out of that building next to the flea market, if people don't know. And now we're in one of the newest buildings in the Gibson building, downtown on Market Street. Oh, it's called the Warren Government Service Building, but everybody refers to it as the Gibson building. But yeah, we've because of our partnership, once again, with TMP, and we gave them some money. They got a lot of grant money. That is scheduled to come down probably this spring as well. So we'll have another new opportunity for development on that footprint where the community services building is right now, but it'll be cleared real quick.
How does one, as the mayor and as the leader of government here in the city, how do you attract some of these commercial, like St. Joe's, for example, like prime spot, neighborhoods, not like every neighborhood, but a lot of neighborhoods are not what they used to be.
But it's a good neighborhood.
It's a good neighborhood. How does one attract a developer, like a business? Because I had a question the other day from a real estate, Brandon Giovanni, because he loves to hear his name, right? He's doing real estate now. In fact, he just moved back to the city. He was living in Howland. He bought a house on the east side, and they're renovating it right now. And he bought this house for a fair price, but he's probably putting, I'm guessing, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 of renovation of this house to have his family move back to Warren. He's a big Warren guy, and he was saying, what is the plan to have to incentivize? Is there a plan to incentivize a residential developer to come in and build either single housing, a neighborhood, or a high rise, or how do you do that?
Well, we are working with one, so we've had some success, and that is the development that I can't say much about, but that has a residential component to it. One of the things, that's why we're doing Foxconn Day in the city of Warren. Another thing is, with the old, we didn't just tear down old St. Joe's and say, hey, we've done it. Pat us on the back, everybody.
Yeah, right.
No, we engaged with through Greenboard LLC and a venture capitalist organization, but we were able to partner with the Kent State University Environmental School of Urban Design, and there's 12 grad students who pretty much use that site as a classroom, and they put together a booklet with each student gave us some ideas on redevelopment opportunities and how we can repurpose that property, and they are outstanding. I meant to bring you, and I will get you the booklet where you can go through, and it gave awesome. Some history of Warren that these kids really did their research. They really enjoyed this project, and we're still working with them, so their work isn't done. But we also paired them up with the community, with Northwest Neighborhood Association. So there'll be stakeholders in the community looking on how to take that new canvas that's going to be created in a great neighborhood along a river that's going to be clean, that borders the park, and we can create a marketing plan to sort of invite people to, this is a great place to live, and it can be a new subdevelopment. But we have the responsibility of getting that neighborhood, which has suffered so long with that eyesore, letting them have their part and their say in what's the new plan for it. So we're not taking them for granted in this process. We're including them. But I'm so excited about the work that these young free minds have come up with, and they're fantastic. And they have all kind of ideas that fits well with the community needs and with the new site that's just ripe for development.
It makes me excited because, of course, I don't want to go anywhere.
Yeah. Okay.
I've been here, I think 15. I got to do the math, but I love being a part of downtown. Yeah. We no longer reside here. although it's still a Warren mailing address,
Yes,
okay,
yes,
it's
yes.
actually a township, still part of, not really part of the city, but part of the city.
Yes.
But anyways, it makes me excited to hear these type of developments, and I think,
Well, and that's the other thing, and I always say this, that's why we emphasize that we need to have strong working relationships with our neighboring communities, because when developers and investors pick a choice to land, whether they're in residential housing, retail, industrial, manufacturing, they don't look at individual communities. They look at regions. So we try to build a strong regional infrastructure, or infrastructure network of marketing that highlights our region, that talks about our partnerships, that show we're all in this together. Howland and Cortland and some of our surrounding neighborhoods, they come to Warren for entertainment.
right.
And vice versa. We go to Mosquito Lake for relaxation and fishing and boating. So we're all in this together. And when we understand that, I think we maximize the value of each individual community.
Yeah, it bums me out sometimes when you see on social media someone from out of town and they're running Warren down, or they're running Youngstown down, or they're wherever the place is.
Yes.
And you're like, okay, you might not live there per se, but you're a neighbor, or you're in the region. Like we talked earlier in the elevator coming up, Tito Brown's been on the show a couple times. I mean, our buddies, and he says, he said Doug's like the OG, okay, because he was the first African American mayor in Youngstown. You're in Warren, and he was Doug's like the OG, but he's like a big brother in a sense. I call and bounce ideas off of him because we're in this together.
Yes.
The dividing line between Mahoning and Trumbull County is on a map, but people from Warren or from Trumbull County go to Youngstown, to Cavelli, and to some of these other great places that they have downtown, and vice versa. So you should be rooting for
each other.
Our neighbors.
We do, and that's why I have a great relationship with. And you're going to see some things in the future that with Highland Township and Warren Township. Even we're in preliminary discussions with Champion to form these joint economic development districts, so that we have our stuff together when these investors, and they're coming. There's an explosion on the horizon that we haven't seen in this valley, and it's all being driven by what's happening at Lordstown with EV, with the EV industry and the battery industry. So we know that these there'll be some demands that we need to be ready to meet. So what we've decided as jurisdictions, as individual jurisdictions, that we need to come together so that we're not fighting when they do come. We're not fighting over water and sewer services. We'll have a template in place so that they can plug and play. Just come in and here's what it is. And everybody wins in that type of a format. And I'm so excited about, my leadership in these other communities, because they get it. They understand, and they're at the table and they're ready to work.
Well, again, just being down here the last 15 years and seeing the development by individual investors, smaller businesses or bigger businesses, and how each one kind of feeds off of the success of the next one. And people would say, like, well, Warren can't support a coffee shop and 4 different restaurants or 6 different restaurants or 10 different restaurants downtown. It just keeps growing. Think about it. You can come down and get a show at the Robbins. You can come get a show at the Packard. You can get a show over at the amphitheater. You can then go to 10 or 12 different restaurants, a brewery, several bars within the vicinity. There's a walking path on the river. The river's in development. Yeah. Some of these structures that are being razzed and rehabilitated provide opportunity for downtown living. I always give mad props to Mark Marvin. I want to ask a question about that. But, Mark Marvin came and bought this building. He's been a incredible landlord, for lack of better terms. He for those listeners, Mark was on before. He bought the Robbins Theater. He's had a couple of these properties downtown where he's developed, there's condos up above us. There's people living down here again, where we were trying to make it cool as like young artists in our 20s and 30s, and we're doing it kind of on on a ragtag level. And then now these places were rehabilitated, and you got the Shines who've invested in their building, and they've done their stuff.
Beautiful job too.
Oh man, they've done great. And so many of these entrepreneurs and business people, how do we keep everybody happy? I'll bring up Mark, where he's invested however much, and that was recently in the paper. And, no surprise, people. Doug and I talked about it. I don't want you to think I'm attacking.
No.
But Mark has been critical of some of these things that we addressed, like zoning and things of that nature. And he has said, hey, I'm halting my investment. I don't know how much he's invested, millions and millions of dollars. How do you keep that person engaged, or how do you get that person back, and how's that working out?
I keep trying to communicate. Let me back up. There's nobody who appreciates Mark Marvin and the Downtown Development Group more than Mayor Franklin. I thank him every time I can for his investment in our community. That investment started with a $35 million investment out on the west end of Market Street.
Yeah, I didn't even mention that, right?
Yeah, that's where it started, and we were able to develop a great relationship by that experience, and the city's still benefiting from that initial investment. Then he started investing in downtown, which I'm extremely appreciative of. And don't get me wrong, and I've told Mark this, I agree with him on a lot of these things, a lot of these issues that he's raised with some of these properties. He's absolutely right. And we're doing everything we can to address them. I just have to keep communicating with Mark. And I always say, I'm going to protect Mark's investment regardless. That's my job. So I'm going to look out for Mark's investment. I'm going to do everything within my power, within my staff's enforcement purview, to make sure that we're addressing them issues. And I want to say this, and I hope Mark listens to this. This isn't the first time Mark Marvin, probably over the past 3 to 4 years, every time Mark sees a problem, I get a text that's probably 4 or 5 paragraphs long, and we've been able to address most of that. This last one probably got out in the press, and so it became public fodder. And in the political season, it became even more, which I'm okay with. But what I'm doing and what I promised Mark is I'll do a better job of communicating with him. But we're doing everything within the law that we can to address those issues that rightfully he points out needs to be addressed. We agree 100% with that. We value Mark. I'm going to protect his investments that he's already made, and we're still trying to attract other investors that's going to also, sort of secure his investments as well.
Sure.
And that's my job as mayor, and I continue to keep doing that with every fiber of my ability that I have left in me.
I'm sure I'll send it to him. I'm sure he will appreciate that, and hopefully he listens, to the show. Prodders out there, Mark Marvin. I hope you consider yourself a prodder. He was a great guest for us.
He's a prodder.
Yeah, I always like to talk about those guys because I don't know if they, guys like him, guys like Paul Klauser.
Yes.
And then I keep using this word stalwart. I'm going to use it again. Guys like Steve Lardis and like Jimmy Economist and
Adam Keck. There's a lot of people.
I mean, you could just keep naming the guys over at the Mocha House, Nick and Bill, and there's a lot of people who were here for a long time and made it through the tough times to lay the groundwork for guys like Keck and guys like Nate and other people that are providing these amenities, so that and Sean O'Brien, who's also a former guest and a client, and hopefully is a prodder. Yeah. I had talked to him the other day because you'd mentioned Foxconn. He's like, man, I want to get the guy from Foxconn to come on the show with us and talk about all these great things. And I was like, cool, I'm going to hold you to it, Sean. So get this guy from Foxconn on. But when those people move here or they move to the region, you want to attract tax dollars to come in because it feeds the engine. And if we don't have all these little ancillary places, not to say little is like to demean them, these smaller businesses, the restaurants, the bars, the breweries, etc., man, you're not going to have a place. They're going to go outside of the city to spend their money.
Correct. And there's not a week that goes by, Jim, probably in the past year, that I haven't had meetings with Foxconn hierarchy. we see the potential, and we need to do a better job probably with Ultium Sales, but they have a different model and makeup in terms of their organizational structure. But Foxconn has been at the forefront, and also helping out. I just learned 2 days ago with my meeting with them from Matt DeWine, who's the governor's grandson, that they're going to sponsor the Scrappers this year.
Oh, cool.
They gave the TFF, Trimble Family Fitness. They're always looking for opportunities to invest in our community, and my job is to make sure that they have those opportunities. But we're talking with them every single time. That's why we thought it was important as the Fund for Warren's Future to sponsor a Foxconn Day in the city of Warren, to just keep extending that olive branch, to keep, that welcome wagon is going to be, it's going to be loaded, it's going to be full of gas, and we're going to keep riding it up and down 45 to make sure that they know that they're welcome in the city of Warren.
I'm writing Foxconn down because the Packard Foundation is in our annual peel mode right now.
Okay.
So maybe I can shake a little money out of the tree for future projects for our.
They're a good go-to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to get to a couple of these, some of these boilerplate, the kitchen sink issues. This has been one it comes up all the time. And unfortunately, I won't get to all these questions.
Okay.
But I do want to definitely get to these next two. A lot of the flooding that has been happening, not only in Warren, but regionally around the area. Boardman's had it, Niles has had it. A lot of what's the cause of that, and how does a city address that for residents that seem like, man, every time it rains, their basements are getting flooded?
Well, first of all, it's probably not every time it rains, but every time we have a significant rain event, we do have some issues. But I'm happy to report that we're addressing that with a $120 million investment into our main station and our pump stations throughout the city to help alleviate that flooding. All of our communities, and that's why you mentioned how it's happening. Some communities are hit worse than ours. It's aging infrastructure, and some of these lines and sewer lines and storm lines are so antiquated and have crushed underneath the surface when you can't see it, and that causes a problem. Well, that's what our $120 million investment is going towards fixing. So, you can have a rain event, and it doesn't matter what you put in, because it was suggested. Remember when we first got the ARP dollars? It was, and I first started giving my town hall meetings across the city of Warren. It was I started those probably a week after we had this humongous rain event.
Monsoon, yeah.
So everybody wanted me to, just put all of that. It's only $28 million. Put all of that in the sewer system and walk away. Well, first of all, it wouldn't put a dent in the real problem, because it's probably close to $150 million fix. Well, we're going to do $120 million of that remedy right now. That's already in place. It's already financed, and we're paying on it. And the work is already getting underway. So that's how we're trying to address that.
That's exciting. I'm happy for those, because there's nothing worse.
There isn't. And everybody think the mayor's immune from these things. Ask my wife. And I'm down in my basement when that rain event happened. I've had to park at a school and wade to my own house because of this. So and remove equipment, and I think I put about $6,000 into a new sump pump system and having the waterproofers come in. So it is a problem, and we're very sensitive to it. And not just, it happens sporadically on different sides of town, and that's what's so tricky about it. But it all goes to how much sewage and stormwater we can process at our plant, and the infrastructure in the field that's throughout our city. It's probably about 200 miles of antiquated infrastructure. So that's about from here to Columbus. Think about all of those lines that are not decades, centuries old, in fact, that we have to start that process of replacing. There hasn't been an investment in our system since I've been in public service. So I'm glad that we're undertaking that task on, and it's going to provide a lot of relief in the years to come.
We got the roads and the water. We're taking care of some things.
Yes.
on the table recently, and of course it was on the table before. Got to talk about charter government. And I'm asking you as a layman, obviously, but certainly one is like, explain it to me on the lowest common denominator, because sometimes I'm a monkey brain. What is it, charter government, and what are like some kitchen sink issues that residents actually care about that would be addressed and or fixed if we went with the charter government? What are the pros and cons? Like,
okay, I'm going to, Jim, I'm going to try to be unbiased and give the best explanation that I can, because I work with a lot of mayors throughout the country, and particularly within the state of Ohio, both charter and statutory governments. My personal opinion, I know I can tell you about a statutory government like the back of my hand, because it's the form of government that I've been tasked to work within throughout my tenure. Charter form of government, what I do know, I don't know what it can solve that statutory can't, but it gives voters some flexibility in terms of appointments, term limits. But here's the short and long of it. There's probably over 100 different forms of charter government. And what I have a problem with about this initiative is they're not espousing any one form. They're just saying, shall we have a charter government? So it's like, here's the magic box. Put your hand at it and see what you pull out. Well, that's a risk. That's a risk. I can tell you what I do like about my form of government that we currently operate under. And I can do it by way of comparison to some other forms. A statutory form of government was established by the Ohio Revised Code when the Ohio Constitution was formed, and so every statutory form of government operates pretty much under the same structure. In this form of government, there's checks and balances built into the system. That's what I like about it. It takes some power from the mayor, though. When you compare it to other charter forms. By way of example, and I'll use Youngstown since you brought Tito up. Tito, when he was elected mayor, gets probably about 17 appointments. Law director, finance director, police chief, fire chief, and there's a host others. There's a host of other appointments that he gets. In my form of government, I get 2 appointments. Executive secretary, safety service director. And in our form, we have the safety service director combined. In a lot of other statutory, those can be 2 separate positions. But they've combined that positions years ago before I became mayor for efficiency and probably for budgetary reasons. But what I do like about those checks and balances, I can't tell the law director what to say or not to say. He's elected by the people in our form. So he's independent. He has to get elected again. So same with the auditor. I can't tell him what to say our numbers are or our finances are, what's in this account, what's legal financial. I can't tell him what to say or not to say. He's elected independently. He has to answer to the people. Treasurer, same thing. Those are not appointments of the mayor in our system. They're elected by the voters. So I think those checks and balances, they go a long way towards good government. I mean, you can have a myriad forms of charter government. You could have where council selects a city manager. And he now by way of example, that's Newton Falls form. And that city manager, he doesn't stay there long, and they have to offer him a lot of money because he has 10 bosses. And they don't always get along or see things the same way. So that can be more political.
Definitely not in Newton Falls recently. Holy smoke.
Yes. They had 8 charter amendments on their ballot the last election. And even though that city decertified their police department, just think about it. our police chief, I can't fire or nor the safety. We can for the right reasons we can let go of a police chief or a fire chief, but you have to show cause. He doesn't serve at the pleasure of the mayor. It's merit based. He has to take a test in order to be promoted to that position, and it's removed from politics. That's what I like about our system. So
I'm taking it you'll probably be not voting for the charter.
No, and here's the other problem with it: the timing. And then this was in the newspaper. The timing of it is terrible.
The timing is awful.
The timing is terrible. You have all municipal seats up for re-election. You're trying to change the form of government on the same ballot. Then you're going to elect from 30 people, 30 candidates, 15 to serve on the charter commission. You can't have an intelligent civil discussion in that kind of a landscape, in that kind of an atmosphere, when politics is just running rampant. I think this is a better issue for an off-election year. I think cooler heads, you might get something good out of it. But this is just bad timing from my perspective.
Well, I think it's bad timing from the voters too, because I don't even know enough about it, and that's part of the issue too. Now, of course, it's encompassed upon the voter to inform himself. But again, like we said before, man, we got so many things going on. You're running your kid to soccer, to this, to that. You're doing that. You got time to learn about a new form of government, something that's extremely important.
Extremely important.
And now you're focused on not only re-electing new officers to serve the public, but then potentially new officers to serve this new form of government that you don't really
know.
And listeners, I'm not suggesting one way or the other. I don't have a horse in the race, so to speak, because I don't vote in the city anymore. However, I agree with you, Doug. I think the timing is bad, and it confuses people.
Yes.
It has a potential to confuse people. I don't know enough about it.
And it's too important where confusion shouldn't rule the day. Or just say, I got enough to think about on this ballot. I'm just going to vote anyway on this charter issue. I mean, they're going to be writing the Constitution of the city of Warren. Whoever these 15 are, if the voters say, yes, we shall adopt a charter and seat a charter commission. I just think it's terrible timing, notwithstanding the cost. Everyone has to, if they say yes, every registered voter will receive this packet and they adopt it and have to vote on the charter after it's written by this commission. It's just a lot of moving parts at a time when you're voting on a lot of other things. And what's really kind of frustrating to me is you're voting for all these municipal seats that will be serving under a statutory form, but you're also sort of voting on to take away that form that they're running for. So I just think the confusion, I don't even know if it's by design, but it's terrible timing. And I think it's just better placed and cooler minds can decipher through all of this confusion in an off-election year. And what I always said, even before this started, is most good charter initiatives are truly products of the community, not a handful of people who have a political axe to grind.
I was going to say, it kind of feels like a referendum.
Yeah. Now, you can always vote us out.
Right.
Not that I'm recommending that. but therein lies a lot of power of the electorate.
Yeah.
If they
exercise it.
If they exercise it. And I always say, I've seen bad charters and bad statutory governments, and I've seen good on both sides. It's not the form of government, it's the quality of leadership.
Speaking of, who are your heroes, Doug? Like, specifically, is there anyone in public life or personal life that you look to as an example on how to be an effective public servant?
Obviously, my mom and dad are my two biggest heroes, but I will point to probably someone who only a few people know. There's two gentlemen who were part of my experience in high school. One was a gentleman named Thomas Foreman, who was a science teacher, and the other one was an English teacher. Thomas Foreman was a black civil rights guy, and the other one was sort of like a hippie guy. His name was John Brennan, went to Ohio University. He taught English. He was a poet. He was a cool guy. And I admired both of them from different lenses. But both of them individually saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And they sort of, because, at that time, I'm talking about mid-'70s, you didn't have to go to college. There was jobs aplenty. I could have went to the steel mill. I could have went to the auto plants. I could have went anywhere. And probably made more money than a college graduate. But they sort of harnessed me separately. And Mr. Brennan, the young white hippie guy, actually walked, because I was first generation, actually walked me through the process. Because my family didn't have that experience of applying for college, what to expect and all of that. And Mr. Foreman, the old black civil rights guy, just pulled me up with some straight, hard talk and say, you got too much potential to be wasting. Because I was a little bit of a goof off at that time. I was having fun, like a lot of high school students. And they both sort of simultaneously, not knowing, had a major influence on how I projected my future. And I'm always indebted to them. Both of them have passed on.
I'm sorry to hear that.
And out of they have. But hopefully, they live through me.
That's awesome, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
If you're looking to buy new or sell your current home or commercial property in Northeast Ohio or Northwestern Pennsylvania, look no further than Brokers Realty at brokerssold.com. Unwavering dependability, steady and always devoted, firm yet fair. Patty Knepp is ready to be your next judge. Please vote May 2nd. Find out more at knepforjudge.com. Paid for by the committee to elect Patty Leopardi Knepp for judge. To listen to the remainder of this episode, go to theprodcast.net. Pick your favorite podcasting app from our menu and subscribe to the show for notifications on new episodes, or listen to your favorite past guests on the ProdCast.